Welcome to Football Today, Team Profiles and Projections. I'm your host, Bobby Skinner, here with my co-host, Justin Penik. And today we're looking at the Cleveland Browns, who came in our power rankings at 13th, went 11-6 last year. And I fell in love with the Browns team last year because of their defense, but I thought their offense was frustratingly bad. Not just bad, but frustratingly bad. But it's going to be funny when we read these stats that they were 11th in offensive scoring and 14th in defensive scoring. But we're going to look deeper into that. They were 28th in offensive EPA per play. On defense, they were first in EPA per play. Kevin Stefanski's fifth year as their head coach. They fired their offensive coordinator, Alex Van Pelt, who's with the Patriots, and then hired Ken Dorsey, who was fired by the Bills midseason last year. Defensive coordinator Jim Schwartz, his second year, longtime defensive coordinator, head coach at one point for the Lions for a lot of teams. This team was dragged to the playoffs by their defense. The number one pass defense and a defense that actually put up points, right? 5 touchdowns put on the board by the defense, but plagued by an offense that wasn't just bad, but had the most turnovers in the NFL. They're a team that's done more to address backup QB. They have a new OC. But what changes with a team that didn't change the roster all that much for the Cleveland Browns?
Right. First of all, hello, Bobby Skinner, and hello to everybody that's listening. If you want the behind the scenes of how the TPPs are done, we've taken a couple-week break from the TPPs, but now we are back. My beard isn't crazy. My beard is more groomed. We are in a hotel room in Massachusetts, and I hope you're enjoying the TPPs. Please like, subscribe, and tell a friend about it, because guess what? I would like to keep on doing these even next year, and the more people that like about it, and the more people that like it, more people that view it, the more likely we'll be able to do it even next year. Bobby Skinner, the Browns are such a fun team to talk about, man. And I would even argue that if you look at their, let's take wide receiver out of it, let's take the quarterback room out of it, and even the running back room, since there's question marks about at least the running back room and the quarterback room, right? But I think O-line, and I think every single position level on defense, is this not possibly a top 5, maybe even top 3 talented roster in the NFL? Like, this is such a fun team to talk about and analyze, and it is filled with dudes, right?
Oh, I mean, offensively, there's talent, right? Nick Chubb back. Amari Cooper is one of the best wide receivers in the game. Yeah. David Njoku had a career year last year for them. The offensive line. Besides one position. It's the quarterback, which is insane, the fact that he's the highest paid quarterback in the NFL with guaranteed money.
And the team's biggest question heading into this season, Bobby, I think it is the dumbest and most annoying question about any team in the NFL. And the question is, what if Deshaun Watson improves?
Yeah, and I'm always someone who's like, is this guy just really done? Right? With Russell Wilson after that year in 2022. It's like, is Russell Wilson really just bad now? And then he wasn't very good the next year, even though the box score stats were pretty solid. And I think with Watson, like, you just have to realize he's just not what he was in Houston.
Right.
Like, he's been a bad quarterback.
But it's not just what he was in Houston, Bobby. Out of 46 quarterbacks that have at least 320 plays over the last 2 years.
He's been one of the worst starters in the NFL.
Where does Deshaun Watson rank in EPA and CPOE composite? There's 46 quarterbacks. Where does he rank out of those 46?
Oh, I don't have CPOE. I'll say 31st.
35th. 35th out of 46. You want to know who he's right behind? Matt Ryan. You want to know where he's right above? Desmond Ridder. And that's also now we're getting into the Deshaun Watson years, where we have a $63.977 million cap hit over the next 3 seasons, and they cannot get out of it. They cannot. They are living in it. We are here. We are in the Deshaun Watson where they got to take their medicine era. And it's I don't know, man. What if Deshaun Watson improves is the question that, I love Chris Rose. It is the question that has bothered me every single time that Chris Rose is asked, especially as a Browns fan, or even just as kind of like the main host of the show. It is a question that has just bugged me every single time, because I see no path. I see a path where maybe Deshaun Watson isn't 35th out of 46 quarterbacks over a 2-year sample.
You look at the last 2 years and you say, who are the worst starters in the NFL? He's in that group.
Yeah, and he's barely played for numerous reasons.
Yeah, for suspension or for the injury he had last year. I mean, the only starters last year to average less yards per game than him were Bryce Young, Kenny Pickett, and Ryan Tannehill. He was 27th in yards per attempt, 27th in EPA per play, 35th in success rate. And it wasn't he's been it's not just like, he's not being the MVP candidate that he was in Houston. He's like an active negative to the team.
Right.
Like he holds the team down at times with the turnovers and stuff.
But he was 5-1.
Yeah, I know, which is crazy. We'll talk about the Cleveland defense. Like, he's late on everything. He's reckless with the football. But Alex Van Pelt is out. I didn't like Alex Van Pelt as a play caller. Sorry about it, Drake May. Like I said, they were 11th overall in scoring, but 23rd in points per drive. What frustrated me so much about the Cleveland offense last year wasn't that they weren't good, because with Deshaun Watson getting injured and having to play DTR and PJ Walker and even Joe Flacco.
Do you want to hear this stat? Once Watson went down, the Browns had to change QB 11 times last year, if you count in-game changes as well. 11.
Yeah, so it's not like, oh, man, how were they not a good offense last year? I was not expecting. But what they should have been is a ball control offense, right? With the way their defense is, they should have been a ball control offense, and they were the exact opposite. They had the most turnovers in the NFL. They had the most interceptions, the fourth most fumbles lost.
Joe Flacco and Deshaun Watson have the 2 highest average depth of targets in the NFL last year.
Yeah, they should have been. And again, I know they couldn't run the ball the same way without Nick Chubb, which we'll talk about. But they should have been a ball control offense. And to me, it was unacceptable, the fact that they were playing offense like that. And obviously, Kevin Stefanski owns a lot of that. It's not Alex Van Pelt's gone. So I think Stefanski has to look inward on that and ask, how are we going to run this offense this year with the defense that we have? Yeah. But there are things I like about this offense, and there's another thing I didn't like last year. They tried to turn Elijah Moore into this ultimate gadget player, and he's just not that. Try and turn him into your just regular slot receiver. You don't need to give him, a million manufactured touches per game.
Which I actually think without Deshaun Watson, Elijah Moore was not fully that. Very interesting to look at the Watson splits with some players like Elijah Moore and David Njoku, and then without Watson. So we'll talk about that.
So I like Ken Dorsey as a play designer in Buffalo, and you look at all the metrics, and the Bills' offense was really good under Ken Dorsey, and he was looked at as like a scapegoat. And in a way, I do think he was. But there was worries about his sequencing last year as a play caller for Buffalo. And the run rate skyrocketed for Buffalo when he left. And it was for the better, even though they were actually scoring a little less points per game. That offense was more efficient. Mm-hmm. They were able to control the ball a little bit longer. So it'll be interesting to see how Ken Dorsey changes. But by the way, this is the team that Ken Dorsey played for in the NFL with the Browns.
Look at that.
So let's talk about the passing game. We talked about all the bad stats. I do kind of like this receiving group of Cooper, Njoku, Judy, and Moore. Right, okay. Cooper's had 140 catches and 2,400 yards the last 2 years with the Browns. We know he's an awesome wide receiver, runs the full route tree, and runs, damn good. And Njoku had a career year last year and really popped off with Flacco. He had 35 catches, 460 yards, and 4 touchdowns in the last 5 games. Was 6th in tight end receiving last year. It'll be interesting to see if he can replicate what he did last year again, because like I said, it was a career year for him. And I know people don't like Jerry Jeudy because, one, he hasn't lived up to the draft hype. His first year, he had a big drop problem. I think he's better than what the public persona is of him. He's not what he was hyped up to be coming out of Alabama. But the drop thing comes from a rookie year. He's been good catching the ball since then. He gets open. He runs good routes. There's questions of his mental makeup for a team. But I think Jeudy being in a team where he's the clear number 2 to an Amari Cooper helps him out a lot. And then Elijah Moore's, he's a solid piece in the slot. He's not an advantage. He's not a disadvantage.
They even drafted Jamari Thrash too, which I view as
I like Thrash too. I don't know how much playing time he gets this year, but I do like Thrash.
But I also view him as an Elijah Moore light.
Right.
So but Judy's a good yak piece. They do need to find a way. Amari Cooper is going to eat no matter what. And Amari Cooper ate regardless of whether it was with Joe Flacco or if it was with Deshaun Watson. But the splits of the target share that Elijah Moore had when Deshaun Watson was in there was very, very high. But the overall effectiveness, success rate, EPA, whatever you want to look at, Elijah Moore was actually more effective when Joe Flacco was there, even though his target share went fully down because he was just they manufactured so many touches for him. And then you mentioned how David Njoku became like a weapon and a dude in the NFL with Joe Flacco. And they need to find a way for Deshaun Watson to get him the football more because that was not the case when Watson was under center. So that's the main challenge of this offense this year. Is last year they went way more into 11 personnel. It happened again. All right, well, we're recording on here. We're going to use this. We're recording on here. That's why I'm doing this. All right, so cut at that point. I'll start again.
What the fuck? Anyways, go ahead.
I kind of want to use that. The Browns went way more into 11 personnel last year versus what Kevin Stefanski has done in years past, Bobby, is we're just gonna run the damn ball.
He's trying to play into Deshaun Watson's strengths and it just hurt them.
From what he was doing back in Houston. That's what Deshaun Watson is more comfortable with, throwing out of 11 personnel. However, even the numbers indicate, Bobby, that Deshaun Watson throwing out of 12 personnel on early downs is more efficient, and the EPA per attempt is higher when throwing out of 12 than throwing out of 11, even though they really, really tried to embrace running out of 11 personnel on early downs this year. So I don't know what this team's really the identity is going to be, or really what it should be when you have a quarterback that is not performing that well, but you have so much around him that's built for him, right? Because now you have Jordan Atkins that's going to come in, who's a horrible blocker. Harrison Bryant is now a Raider. So you have the second tight end. If you're going to run more, if the answer is running more 12 personnel, well, you don't really have the blocking presence to really be there, since this still is a very, very good running team. So it seems like they're going to continue to lean more into 11 personnel in early downs.
That's all Ken Dorsey did in Buffalo.
But I think that's a major mistake, and especially if you want to throw more on early downs, which maybe it could be better for them. But you're relying on a quarterback who hasn't been very good. You're relying on him to get the ball to weapons that he's had trouble getting it to in the past, like a David Njoku. I don't know, man. I don't like the identity of where this team is going, because when I think of Kevin Stefanski with the Cleveland Browns, I think of a kick-ass offensive line. I think of a kick-ass running game that, you want to know what? In the face of the NFL that wants to throw the ball more, they have been able to run the ball efficiently. They can run the ball, 25, 30 times a game and still win football games. That's what I think of Kevin Stefanski, the wide zone scheme, right? And I just feel like we're losing the identity of what makes the Cleveland Browns and Kevin Stefanski's Cleveland Browns a very unique team. We're losing that identity. And
so Nick Chubb is back, or, so is supposed to be back for this year. He was balling like always, then he tore his ACL and MCL. He was averaging 6.1 yards per carry, who, again, Rose pointed out to us a few weeks ago. Like, he has one of the best yards per carry in NFL history.
Yes, he's crazy.
To Jerome Ford and Kareem Hunt to 3.6 yards per carry. I actually think Deontay Foreman is a huge addition to this team to help, because I think he's better than Jerome Ford and what Kareem Hunt was last year. But they've lost Bill Callahan, the offensive line coach, who's like one of the O-line coach goats. It's him, like Dante Scarnecchia, and then Jeff Stoutland in Philadelphia. Jedrick Wills and Jack Conklin are on PUP. Conklin may not be back. There is a belief that DeJuan Jones is just going to be the starting right tackle. At left tackle, there's really no good answer. James Hudson out of Cincinnati from a few years ago is just not a good player. Wills tore his ACL in November. So the offensive tackles are a huge question mark, but the interior is elite, right? Of Wyatt Teller, Ethan Pochich, and then Joel Bitonio. This should be a team that, like you said, they should be running the damn ball this year. They should be running the ball, and then when you throw the ball out of play action, whatever, you have the efficiency, you have the guys that get the ball to, who can get open and who can win. But with the defense that they have, because it's going to be hard for their defense to match what they did last year, despite the fact that it's basically the exact same unit. It's going to be so hard because it was so good.
Yep.
That this team just they cannot turn over the ball the way they did last year. Like it was a disgrace. And there was times last year, because we talked about them a lot on Football Today. They were the team I was probably the most interested in last year. I picked them I thought that was a defense that could carry a team to the Super Bowl, and they just kept on turning over the fucking ball. And it reared its head in the playoff game, right? Where the defense didn't play great in the first half, but they're down by 10 in the second half. They throw back-to-back pick sixes to start the second half of that game, and it's over.
Yeah.
And it's over just like that. And there was so many times that even they would give the ball to, like, at the other team's 8-yard line. Like, I remember through the first 8 games of the year, I'm like, here's the touchdowns that they've given up and where those drives started. They were all like the other, at their like 20-yard line, 12-yard line. Like, they just actively screwed them. They lost the Steelers game because of offensive turnovers. They lost other games like that. But they were still able to beat great teams with that defense. They beat the 49ers. I think they beat the Ravens. They were able to beat great teams, but this offense cannot be a turnover. Like, you have to – with Nick Chubb, if Nick Chubb's not ready to go and he doesn't look the same, then it's got to be with Deontay Foreman and Jerome Ford. This has to be a team that runs the ball. You don't play like pussies, but you should be able to run the ball efficiently and put an emphasis on not turning it over, because you have receivers that can be efficient without a ton of usage, and you have the tight end in Njoku. There has to be a huge emphasis on not putting the football in harm's way. Like, they kind of have to give up the idea that Deshaun Watson is this carry your franchise on the back quarterback after the last 2 years.
Yeah, but here's what's really interesting, Bobby, is that
play to the strengths of your players and not to try and get used to Deshaun Watson back.
Right. But the interesting part about Deshaun Watson last year, his first and second half splits, he had a minus .37 EPA per attempt, 32% success rate, and then 5.2 yards per attempt in the first half. In the second half, and this is where you saw like that awesome Baltimore comeback.
Yeah, his last game.
.07 EPA per attempt, 46% success rate, 8.6 yards per attempt. So how can they unlock faster starts? Like, hey, in the second half, if you're behind in games, are you abandoning the run a little bit more? And then that worked for them. Like, I don't know. Like, and I really do think tight end 2 is very, very important for this offense. As I don't think Harrison Bryant was like an awesome kick-ass blocker, but I'll tell you what, Jordan Akins, right? Jordan Akins is not going to be. I think he is a 0 as a blocker, and unless there's somebody else on the depth chart that I'm not super familiar with, but it seems like Akins is going to be the second tight end. And then also, forget running out of 12 personnel. It seems like this offense wants to be run out of 11 personnel a lot, especially on early downs. And are you going to be running the ball, or are you going to be a very run-heavy team while also paying your quarterback $63.9 million over the next 3 years?
They've always been a 2 tight end, even 3 tight end team, right? There was years where they led the league and 3 tight end sets.
They don't have them, man. They're going away from it.
They don't have, like you said, they don't have those guys. Let's talk about the positive of the Browns, though, which is I fell in love with this team because I love defenses like this. I mean, Jim Schwartz came in and made this the best defense in the NFL. Like, I understand the Ravens ended up with the number 1 scoring defense, and they weren't even that great scoring wise defensively. This was the best defense in the NFL. I think it was one of the best defenses in the NFL in a while. They were so negatively affected by their offense, and like I said, the playoffs paint a great picture of that. But they were number 1 in EPA per play, number 1 in yards. That pass rush was deadly. The coverages were confused the shit out of teams. All their corners played well for them. The safeties played well. Like JOK, led linebackers and tackles for a lot. They were just a team that was so well organized. Everyone doing their job. They were monsters, and it starts with the front, right? They were 6 in sacks, number 1 in tackles for a loss last year. Myles Garrett, to me, the best defensive player in the NFL now that Aaron Donald is retired. He had 15 sacks, 14 QB hits, 57 pressures. He was number 1 in pass rush win rate at 27%. 27% of the time he was beating the offensive lineman in less than 2.5 seconds.
And in true pass sets, that's 35%.
Yeah, and he did it almost. He does it essentially only on the left tackle. And then you had Zadarius Smith on the opposite side of him, who was 9th in pass rush win rate, 20th in total sacks, hits, and pressures. So you have those 2 guys, and then on the middle you have 2 excellent two-way players in Dalvin Tomlinson, and then Shelby Harris. Maurice Hurst was a good backup for them. Dalvin, hopefully he's ready to go by the season. But he should play for them at some point this year if he's not ready to go for week 1. That front is just fucking nasty. Yeah, it is an intimidating front to go against when you have. Oh, look, there's Defensive Player of the Year 5 times or whatever it is for Myles Garrett. Yep. There's Zadarius Smith. There's one of the best run-stopping defensive tackles in Dalvin. And then Shelby Harris is your 4th guy. It's just an intimidating thing to play, and it allows everyone on the back end in the linebacker room to play with so much more confidence.
Yeah, I think Dalvin Tomlinson is, one of the top interior defensive linemen in the NFL. Zadarius Smith, I believe, is a number one on 80% of NFL teams. I think that's conservative too.
Right.
And Myles Garrett is just Myles Garrett. And what makes Myles Garrett such a rare breed is you see so many edge rushers today. They try and win around the corner, right? They try and win around the corner. The strength of Myles Garrett is what really separates them. And so many tackles now, like they're thinking about, well, I can't give up the corner. I can't give up the corner. So then they're giving up the bull rush, and Myles Garrett's going to bring it. And you just see how strong he is, and he just controls every single rep and every single play. Controls.
He's a coach's dream because he doesn't cheat. He plays by the defensive rules every time. And what I mean by that is not that other players cheat, but a lot of guys that are like high up in that pass rush win rate, they freestyle. They work outside in, right? They give up their coach rush lane, and the way this coach, like a guy like TJ Watt does this, and I don't want to ding TJ Watt because there's like this big TJ Watt versus Myles Garrett debate in the AFC North.
Very big.
But the difference is that when Watt does that, he's great at it, right? And the whole coaching point is like, hey, if you're going to do that, you better win. And you better win 9 times out of 10. And Watt does that. But what Garrett does is he stays within the defensive responsibility and wins like that. And it allows you to do so many different things because you're not placating to, oh, this is Brian Burns, let him work outside in. That's how he wins. Like, no, it's just he does his responsibility in both the pass and run, and he's able to win like that. So it's just nuts. And then, behind him.
Can I talk about JOK?
Yeah, talk about JOK because you like him maybe more than anybody in NFL media.
Well, here's why. Because,
the numbers are nuts.
He was a Pro Bowler last year.
He should have been an All-Pro, honestly.
My prediction
he should have been an All-Pro. The fact that Patrick Queen was an All-Pro and JOK wasn't is wrong.
If JOK gets over 80% of the snaps this year, last 2 years he had 75% and 76% respectively. 761 snaps. Played 60, so he missed one game. But clearly the Browns, they have him in a little bit of a rotation. A little bit. I want him on the field for 80% of the snaps. And he should be. He should be.
And they lost Anthony Walker and Sion Takitaki.
But they also brought in some other guys too.
Hicks and Bush,
we'll talk about. So there were 4 players in the NFL last year with 20-plus tackles for loss. There were 3 that were edge rushers, defensive ends, and then there was JOK.
Yeah, number 1 for linebackers.
Levante David was the next off-ball linebacker in the tackle for loss rankings with 17. Guess who had the lowest average depth of target in the NFL last year with 1.2?
Depth of tackle, JOK.
JOK. Want to know who was second in average depth of tackle amongst interior linebackers? Denzel Perryman with 1.2. An entire yard less. First in the NFL from second in the NFL was almost an entire yard less. He was second highest in run stop rate. Now, the only thing is, he's such an animal and he goes nuts. He plays like a fucking madman. Third highest missed tackle rate in the NFL last year among interior linebackers. So that's a little high. So we know he could stop the run, and dude, he produces negative plays. 20 tackles for loss, and how many total tackles did he have? 101.
101.
Yeah, that's
1 out of every 5.
Yeah, it's a negative play rate of 20%.
And he was great in coverage. Like, he was just avoided in the pass game.
Let's talk about that. 5th lowest in yards per reception allowed amongst interior linebackers. He was one of 12 linebackers with at least 2 interceptions on the year, and he had 6 pass deflections as well. Oh, and let's talk about him as a pass rusher. Tied for 7th in sacks amongst interior linebackers with 3.5, 4th in win rate, and 7th in pass rush productivity among interior linebackers as well. The dude can do it all. There are not enough people talking about this guy's playmaking ability. He is going to be an All-Pro this year.
Yeah, he should have been an All-Pro last year. Like, with the way that he played last year. I understand. Okay, he had some missed tackles, but he should have been an All-Pro last year. And then overall coverage-wise, 5th most interceptions last year, 3rd most passes defended, number 1 in yards per attempt. Denzel Ward is their cornerback 1, obviously. He's a bona fide CB1 in the NFL. So he gave up 467 yards last year. That was the least amount for I've been thinking about how to word this without it sounding so confusing since I put these notes down.
Okay.
That is the least amount of the most yards given up by a player on a team. So like every team's most yards
CB1.
given up player. It doesn't have to be QB
Oh,
CB2.
got it. I know. I get it. I got you.
He gave up the least amount, right? Number one, like Trent McDuffie gave up 490 on the Chiefs. That was the second highest, and then 7 teams between 500 and 600 yards is their most given up. You know, and then Martin Emerson gave up 466, so he was only 1 yard behind. All three of Denzel Ward, Emerson, and then Greg Newsome were top 15 in pass breakups, all top 15 in forcing completion rate. 2 of them were tied for 6. Newsome's injured. Again, another guy who's like, is he going to be ready for this year? There's there's like 5 different guys on this team that is like that.
Yeah, and I mean, I kind of feel bad at the start of this TPP. We didn't basically talk about how injuries defined the Browns last year.
Yeah.
And I kind of hope that isn't the case this year.
Yeah, but I do think they prepared themselves better for the injuries this year, which we'll talk about the additions and losses. And they don't even allow the safeties like to get near the football because that's how good the pass rush is, the linebacker group is, and the corners.
Grant Delpit's good against the run.
Yeah. So let's talk about new additions and the guys lost. Yeah, Jameis Winston and Tyler Huntley in the quarterback room, Deontay Foreman, Jerry Jeudy, Jordan Akins, Jordan Hicks at linebacker, and Devin Bush at linebacker. They lost Joe Flacco, Kareem Hunt, Harrison Bryant, Jordan Elliott on the D-line, and then Anthony Walker Jr. and Sion Takitaki. I mean, the only downgrade there is tight end.
Which is a big downgrade in my opinion.
I do think I like Anthony Walker Jr. I think linebacker, they're overall better.
Yeah.
But those guys did play really well for them last year.
Use JOK for 100% of the snaps.
The most important part of that was adding Jameis Winston and Tyler Huntley as the backups compared to what they had last year.
Right.
Because last year they very much wrongly got overconfident in Darian Thompson-Robinson out of UCLA because of preseason performance, and that screwed them. And he was awful. P.J. Walker was awful. I mean, Joe Flacco won comeback player of the year last year, and he wasn't even good. That's how bad the other guys were. So, and then the draft class, now the day we're recording this guy got arrested, and Michael Hall, defensive tackle, 2nd round. 3rd round, Zach Zinter. I think he'll be ready to go. 5th round, Jamari Thrash, wide receiver at Louisville. Me and you both like him. And then 6th round, Nathaniel Watson. 7th round, Miles Harden. 7th round, Jawan Briggs.
This is the last year where they won't have top draft picks because of the Deshaun Watson trade.
Yeah.
So none of these guys are, if
none of these guys are going to be asked to start.
No, Michael Hall could work in a rotation if and when he comes back from a possible suspension, or he may not get suspended at all. He was just arrested today. But Zach Zinter's an interesting draft pick because he's an offensive lineman, and they have a lot of interior offensive linemen.
Yeah.
And then
so hopefully he doesn't play.
Jamari Thrash is a guy that can maybe work himself in there. He's a player that I like. He's like an Elijah Moore light.
It'll be interesting because they've drafted some mid-round wide receivers the last few years, and Cedric Tillman, David Bell, and Jamari Thrash. If one of those guys can hit in the rotation.
Amari Cooper last year on his deal, by the way.
Yeah, and it seems like he's not going to be there after this year.
Yeah,
so.
when you have a quarterback $63 million cap hit.
Yeah, so who's your X factor for this Cleveland Browns team?
It's been such a long time since we've done TPPs that I forgot to do an X factor. I mean, can I just say JOK?
I mean, he's just a good player. I don't know if you can consider him an X factor.
X factor. No,
this was the only team where I thought about going quarterback for the X factor.
No,
even though that's not what an X factor is.
No, it's not what an X factor is. I'll go with Jerry Jeudy.
That's a good one because he really has been like a up and down player in his career. He's looked like a good wide receiver 2 in the NFL.
Like we know Amari Cooper's going to be good.
And now he's got a clear wide receiver 2 role.
We know that Amari Cooper's going to be good. We know that David Njoku can be good. But if you have 3 guys that can really elevate the offense and quarterback, that could obviously help.
Mine's Deontay Foreman.
Nice.
Because Nick Chubb, we don't know he tore his ACL and his MCL last year. That's hard to come back from. They need him to be a lot better than what they had in Jerome Ford. And they still have Jerome Ford, but what they had in Ford and Kareem Hunt. And I think Foreman can be that. Over under 8.5 wins for your Cleveland Browns. They feel like a team that Vegas would bet doesn't do anything like they did last year because of the offensive issues. And it's just so hard to replicate that great of defense from one year to the next.
Yeah, I mean, they had some great wins against some good quarterbacks too, but they also played the Texans without C.J. Stroud. They played the Cardinals.
No, they had C.J. Stroud. They had him without. It was the right tackle that was out that they just abused.
I thought C.J. Stroud was out with a concussion that game. No.
I'm pretty sure no. Let me look up the box score on stat. You're right. They were without C.J. Stroud.
So they had a big win against the Texans without C.J.
They beat
Stroud.
the 49ers. They beat the Ravens. They beat the Steelers.
Yeah, but they also beat the Steelers twice with Kenny Pickett. They had they beat Russell Wilson. They had Joe Burrow in his first game.
They destroyed the Bengals,
injury.
but they still destroyed the Bengals.
Yeah. Oh man, 8.5. So 8.5.
Yeah.
They won 11 last year.
Yeah.
Dude, I'm going over.
Me too. Even if they disappoint and go 9-8, that's still over for the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, I'm going over. I just think this team is too good. I hope Stefanski's good, man. I know you we've had this debate on Football Today. I think he deserved to be Coach of the Year last year.
I don't.
I think getting how much went wrong offensively, especially with the injuries, how many guys landed on IR.
But they were awful. They were a turnover. The fact that he gets credit for the defense being that great is the offense was a thorn in their side.
Yeah.
They kept on turning over the fucking ball. It wasn't like, oh, look at what he did with the quarterbacks. It's like, no, they didn't coach them to not turn over the damn ball. That's the easiest, even though it'd be frustrating to watch, the easiest thing you can do with a quarterback is protect the football. This is what we are. Do not try and be a hero. Protect the football.
Yeah, but then you also get big plays on the other side of it too.
But did they get the big I know they got some to Njoku and Cooper a little bit, but man, they harmed their defense. They had a great defense. They had a Super Bowl level defense, and their offense actively harmed it.
I'm gonna go over them.
I'm going over too. And again, I don't think Kevin Stefanski's a bad coach. I just don't think he deserved Coach of the Year last year.
I also expect Ravens regression too in this stuff.
All right, that's the Cleveland Browns, and this is Football Today.